Everyone should just go out in the forest and find themselves a cypress tree and look at a cypress tree, a big one. You know, it's a wonder.
Tell me if I'm not making sound bites, because I know you don't want a whole damn story. You just want a bite.
My name is Maclin Williamson. I am a timber framer. We live on a farm here, and all of that informs what we do with our craft. Yeah, that's what I am.
My name's Julian Williamson. Maclin Williamson is my son. Yeah, I spent a fair amount of time in the entertainment industry. After I got ready to leave, then, and even during, Maclin and I started timber framing together, and gradually that's grown into more and bigger projects. We started timber framing nearly 10 years ago. The whole project of timber framing wouldn't have started if my dad had not rescued about 150 really large cedar trees from a burn pile near Somerville, about 10 to 12 miles from here. Well, when Dad passed unexpectedly, these cedars were there, and I began to think what ought to be done with them that would honor Dad and the trees as well. And rather than do another cabin, I investigated other ways to use timber in its natural state, in its big state, so you're not cutting it up into really small pieces.
Timber framing, you have an entire joint of 3 inches by 4 inches by 6 inches long that fits into the other piece, and so there's a huge amount of bearing surface and volume of wood that resist all that compressive, and all the stresses are contained within the wood itself.
Timber framing is an ancient style of construction. It's been with us from ancient times, but was perfected some in the Middle Ages when the medieval churches were built. Cathedrals like Notre Dame, like Chartres, like Westminster Abbey are built, their roof structures are built using large timbers and large braces to support a noble structure, and these timbers are visible from within the structure. And so basically it gives you an idea of how the structure is built. It gives you a sense of wonder that this is done with natural materials. It gives you a sense of wholesomeness that it is done with natural materials. And it somehow, timber framing helps us to build buildings in a way that recalls how the trees were before they came into the structure. It's fractal. In other words, when you go see a tree growing in nature, you see a post and branches. When you move it into a timber frame, you see a post and you see branches that come off in a similar fashion. So it reminds you of a forest in a way. In fact, the roof of Notre Dame, which was recently reconstructed with timber, the way it was done in the Middle Ages, is called the forest. When we design a timber frame, we keep 3 things in mind that might be our motto. 1, it has to be built for humans. First, it has to be a human scale, but also it has to be a place where people, not machines, are comfortable in. In other words, we generally don't like concrete slabs because they don't feel good to the feet. What we like is something that responds to humans. And so we design according to human dimensions. We look at the ratios of the human body, the hand, and try and find multiples of that feel warm to a human. Secondly, we want to have integrity with local materials. We believe that structures should look like they proceeded out of the region that they came from. If you use local materials, then you won't be in danger of the pride of trying to make yourself or the structure better than where it came from. So we like using cypress, we like using oak, we like using pine, we like using cedar. Materials that grow here where we're from, West Tennessee. The last thing I would say that would be a motto is we want our structures to be noble. They don't need to just be human-sized and appealing to humans. They don't just need to be honest with the materials. They also need to ennoble people by the way they're made, by the things they're made of, and how we treat them, and by the way they present themselves to others.
We're not trying to impart our will only on the material. We're allowing the material to speak for itself, and that's what timber framing does. And that's what I want to do personally, like spiritually, you know, allow the material to speak for itself. Okay, so a person walks into a traditionally, I say traditionally, it's not traditional at all. It's very new, but like a typical structure, you know, gypsum, stud wall, the works. But you walk into a timber frame building or a timber frame house or a timber frame church, and instead of it being this perfect gypsum wall on every seamless surface, your eye gets broken up by these beautiful wooden timbers that have their very own character. I mean, hell, they've been growing in the forest for 150 years. They ought to have some character after that. So you get to see some knots, and then, you know, 8 months later, there's like, oh, there's a crack that opened up. Oh, wow, look at how it's weathering. You know, that's a beautiful, like, blue gray that's forming on that wood. I mean, it's just lovely to look at. And so what's happening is that the end client is getting to have a relationship with the material. We hand raise all of our structures using a pair of shear legs and block and tackle and 3/4 inch rope and 3x2 shivs that give us 5-to-1 purchase power. It's just an amazing experience, because what happens is 8 or 9 guys get on the end of a rope and they just pull with everything they got. You know, it becomes guttural and physical. It becomes extremely real when you're pulling on the rope and you realize, I'm gonna have to put some more ass behind this or this structure is not gonna come up. There's only one way to do it. You gotta pull the fucking rope, and then up comes 8 or 9 pieces of wood all at once, and it's set in its place.
I love to see a bunch of men come together, women too, and raise a structure. It builds something. Look, almost everything, we've been led to believe that we can't do anything without a computer, without a machine, without some hydraulics, without a crane. We can. Beautiful stuff was done by hand for millennia. The great cathedrals were built by hand. We can do it again. And there's a quality to the building that stays with it when you raise it by hand.
It becomes a spiritual experience when you sit there with these people that by the end of the raising, they become your comrades.
I'd like for Inheritance Timberframes to build some noble structures that people will look at from the outside and feel that it's beautiful and a part of its place. And I would like for them to feel while they're inside it that they are encouraged and ennobled by the structure, and feel that they are embraced and at home and possibly inspired by it, and that they might add a little inspiration of their own in a way that I don't see.
So what do I want to see Inheritance Timberframes do in the future is I want to see us build structures that are the only hope of being passed down. They're worthy of being invested in. They're worthy of being built by people that give a shit about how they're built and the message that it sends. But if I have an opportunity to build for something that matters, then that would just be a delightful existence.